I think that in March it was, at South by Southwest. We've been going around the country. A good friend of Lila's and a very good friend of mine, Nora Guthrie. Nora Guthrie is the daughter of the great Woody Guthrie, right? And we have been doing these conferences and concerts, education programs all over the place. Matter of fact, this past weekend I was at Penn State University. Last week at Penn State University, we had a major conference, and then we go back to New York this coming week at Brooklyn College, and a big concert at Brooklyn College, and then ultimately ended at the Kennedy Center in mid-October. But we did one at South by Southwest, and the first person that Nora invited was you. You're a good friend, and she loves your music, so she sends her best regards. And I know Woody Guthrie was an influence of yours. As a matter of fact, why not start there? So let's talk a little bit about your roots, because your roots are very, very interesting. They're cross-cultural, and they are, especially in terms of the music, they're quite complex as well. So tell us, how does music come into your life, and where do those roots come from?
Yeah, well, I was blessed with bicultural and tricultural family. My mother's side is from the state of Oaxaca in southern Mexico, and yeah, a lot of Oaxacanos around here. And she was raised in the Mixtec language, which is one of 64 indigenous languages that are alive today in Mexico, and well, and surviving. Many of them are in growth, and some of them are dying. And my father's side was a Scottish American who had to have a whiskey every evening. Of course. And some huevos rancheros en la noche. And so that was, you know, my family. My grandma was a beautiful indigenous lady, campesina, who did not read or write. And she taught me about faith and about believing in this mystical, magical world of corn and of plumed serpents that came from the sky and gave us the fertility of the land and of the water. So musically, the influences are very strong with ranchera music, traditional Mexican songs, Pedro Infante, Lola Beltrán, Lucha Reyes. And of course, on the other side, my father listened to Bach, cantatas. He listened to Bob Dylan, John Coltrane, Miles Davis. And so I had beautiful influences, and of course Woody Guthrie as well. So I think when I discovered that my ethnic background had to do with migration, and the story of migration really touched me in a deep way when I came across a story of a man in Oaxaca who had passed away in his intent to cross the border, and his father brought his body, was in the truck, in a pickup truck, parked outside of my mother's car parts shop. And he said to me, "Usted puede traducir este documento? Could you please translate this death certificate? I'd like to know how my son passed away." That's all he wanted. And I had to tell him what it said. You know, it said that he had drowned, and that there were a few unknown causes for this. And it just, you know, dawned on me that this was a very poignant and difficult story to tell, but that it was very important to tell. And I guess that from what I have learned from Woody Guthrie, I thought it was very important to start composing and performing songs that had to do with these stories. And this was a very dark story, but there are so many beautiful, wonderful, magical, amazing stories that we have in the immigrant experience. And I'm really into exploring them and singing them.
The idea of including in a song a story that has characters, a plot, almost like a short story. There's a lot that can be learned from a great song that tells a great story.
Yes.
In one of our Woody Guthrie trips, we went up to Salinas, California, the home of John Steinbeck, And I'm reminded of what John Steinbeck, for those of you who remember from school, John Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath, one of the great American novels. Woody Guthrie had written a song called Tom Joad. Tom Joad is the major character in The Grapes of Wrath. And they only met once here in Los Angeles when they were beginning to film the movie The Grapes of Wrath. And someone went up to John Steinbeck and said, do you know Woody Guthrie? And he says, yeah, that little bastard. He wrote in one song what it took me 540 pages to write. That's a good song.
That's a great song.
That's a good song.
Yeah.
So when you think about when you write, a lot of what you write is coming from the dual cultural experiences you have, and then the overriding immigrant experience. How much of what you write is autobiographical?
Well, I think it has to do with the personal experience in terms of emotion. I think for me, that's the driving force, and of course with the mind. Sometimes, like I would like to compose some more songs about immigration right now, and I'm having a hard time. I think because I'm not really focusing on the emotion of it, and I think some of the best songs that we have written that convey the story that we want to convey have been after having a particular personal experience with these themes. For example, we wrote a song called La Niña, and I say we because my husband, Paul Cohen, who's sitting over there in the audience, and I write songs together. And so we wrote a song about young women who immigrate, who migrate, I'm sorry, I'm speaking Spanish, Spanish here, from the little rural communities in Mexico and go to the city, sometimes Mexico City, and then go to the border and find a way out of poverty, of the poverty of pride a lot of times. And so I found this fascinating as a subject for the song. So we did this, and curiously, we had a few tours around the border, and so it's kind of like the music took us to experience it in a personal way and really meet a lot of maquiladora workers and people who had this story. So it is in that sense.
Do you, as a writer, you and your husband, it's a team?
Yes.
Describe your team. How does that process work? Does he write music, you write lyrics, vice versa?
I think that I start with a certain idea. Like right now we're composing a song for Mariachi Gringo, and so we wanted to have certain elements. We want him to be singing about tequila. This is very important because our experience in Jalisco, tequila has been very central. and then I come to Paul and I say, okay, this is what I like, and he's like, okay, this is kind of going into the bushes. This isn't really telling me a story. So it's kind of like he's very critical of my lyrics. So we try to, tweak that, and then we work on a harmony. And sometimes Paul comes up with a beautiful, more sophisticated harmonic situation because I have only a limited knowledge of 2 or 3 chords. So that's very helpful. And then the guys, the band, La Misteriosa, they also pitch in. Yeah. A lot of the times the arrangement of a song will take it to a whole other direction. And we'll be performing in a little while a song called The Queen of the Underworld, which actually was, I wrote originally in English, and the lyric is down there, actually. Yeah, I'm cheating, my cheat sheet is down there. Because it turned out that I started singing it in English, but then it had like a more norteño kind of a feel. So we just turned it into a norteña and we sing it in Spanish mainly. So that's kind of the process. The song kind of directs us.
The music that you write, lyrics aside, the music that you write, well actually the songs, sometimes they're hard to categorize. I mentioned your name that you were coming here to a couple of different people. You have so many influences and so many musical influences that come up in the music. It's very exciting. most people would call you a world artist. Do you think world music? I mean, is that the category you're most comfortable with, or how do you see yourself? Because clearly no artist likes to be categorized, but when you deal with it as when you turn the art into commerce, people have to know what it is. I'm curious because everyone had a different point. Oh, well, she's a Mexican artist, no, she's Mexican American artist, she's a world artist. Well, how do you see yourself?
Well, I guess it's of this planet, as some people have said the word music is, and it's about roots. You know, I like to say that it's about roots because we do look to the roots of the blues and of hip hop and of all kinds of music.
You've got so much of that in there. Oh, it's a real pot full. It's really cool. But when you look at your influences, we talked about your family, obviously. What are some of the other influences, some of the artists, some of the people that you listen to? Your dad listened to Dylan and Woody. Who were you listening to as you're growing up? Besides what your parents are telling you to listen to, or encouraging you to listen to?
Well, I'm listening to a crazy Balkan band from Serbia called Kočani Orkestra.
A Balkan band from Serbia?
Yeah.
Okay.
They've had a very strong influence on our music.
Really?
It's curious because they have a lot of similarities with Mexican music in some ways, except the scales are quite different, right, Paul? If I'm right. mostly minor, and most of the Mexican stuff is in major. But then I come from southern Mexico, where a lot of big bands, big brass bands, is a big tradition. And there are a few here in LA, actually, that I have been able to sing with. They're amazing, made out of mostly children. A lot of these kids are reading music before they are reading, literature, which is very beautiful in Mexico.
Well, it's a language,
It's a beautiful language to see develop in kids.
Did you, as a child, take singing lessons? How do you learn to sing?
I did. I started taking lessons when I was 15, and my father passed when I was 16, and I continued studying in Bellas Artes in Mexico, which is the conservatory in Mexico, and then I continued at the U of M in Minnesota when I went to school.
Were you going back and forth?
Back and forth, I had that privilege.
Minnesota, Mexico, that's a cold, hot.
Yeah.
Very cold.
Yeah. Yeah, but curiously, culturally, it's similar in some ways because we're very kind of collective consciousness aware. I know that's kind of crazy, but the community is very important in the state of Oaxaca. And also in Minnesota, because a lot of Norwegians
and
Swedes.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was similar, but racially very different.
Yes. Very different. When you consider yourself today in 2012, the music business has changed quite a bit in the last few years or so. How hard is it for a band like you to sustain? And how do you get new artists? How much do you use the internet? Explain how you run this as a business, as you must.
Wow, well that would really be Paul's question, but I guess...
Feel free, Paul.
Yeah, come on, Paul.